Hello, everyone. This is recording number 4 for a series on how to write a paper for a class in philosophy. Today, I want to talk about how to write the introduction for your paper. And if you have looked at the recordings 1, 2, 3 in the series, you have all the components that you need for an introduction. So if you've worked with these recordings, you have a kind of outline now for your paper. You have a question that is your topic and something like an answer to that question, which is your proposal, which is what you're going to defend in the paper. And those are the 3 components which typically are included in an introduction. An introduction raises a question, makes a proposal, or says, this is what I'm going to say in response to my question. And then it announces something like a progression of thought. What are going to be the steps in your argument? Now, in some sense, that is it. But I want to address 2 objections that you may have in mind and that help us think a little further about how to write an introduction. One objection is that you might think, well, I would prefer to write the introduction once I have a complete draft of my paper rather than write the introduction right away. And to that, I want to say you're right. In a sense, it is inevitable that you are going to write or rewrite your introduction once you have the complete paper, because you are going to rethink dimensions of your argument, of what you want to defend as you complete the paper. And if you have a kind of bullet point outline for your paper that is quite precise, where you have articulated, here's my topic, here is my proposal, and here are the steps that I want to make in the paper, then you can just sort of start to write the paper and not worry too much about drafting an introduction now, because then your bullet point outline can serve as a word to-do list. If your outline, however, is still a little bit imprecise, undecided in some respects, then it is useful to at least draft an introduction, because that helps you precisify what you really want to say. And it helps you make, as it were, a plan of action, because if you say in the introduction, in the first section, I introduce such and such an argument. In the second section, I consider such and such an example, and so on and so forth. So if you announce the structure of your paper in that kind of way, well, then you're also, as it were, telling yourself, here's where I start, here's my next step, and so on and so forth. And that is useful. Now, the second hesitation or objection that may come to mind is you may think this sounds somehow awfully boring, as if all introductions were somehow the same. Question, answer, announcement of the structure. And again, I want to say you're right. Surely there are a million ways of writing good introductions. Now, here's what I want to suggest. You can look again at the syllabus for the class that you took, where you're now writing your seminar paper, and just ask yourself which readings, which articles that you studied appealed to you in the sense that you enjoyed reading them. They were somehow readable, engaging, and so on. And then you just reread the introductions of those papers in order to get a sense of how were those authors writing their introductions. And you will see that there are indeed a lot of ways of doing this. So some people formulate the topic or question that they are writing about really in a crisp kind of way, half a sentence even. And maybe even already the second half of the sentence indicates what their proposal is going to be. And then there's just the briefest announcement of what the structure is going to be. And off they go and they start to write the paper. Others write more complex introductions where maybe they make a few disclaimers. They set aside a few issues in order to narrow down what precisely they are going to examine in the paper, and so on and so forth. And yet others start with a story or an example or a quote in order to, as it were, illustrate the problem that they want to examine. So this is an incomplete list of ways to do it, just to kind of indicate, of course, there are a lot of ways of doing this. Nevertheless, if you reread a few introductions of papers that you like, you will see that one way or another, the author of the paper needs to somehow communicate to the reader, here is an interesting puzzle, a question, a topic, something that is worth thinking about. And here is some kind of indication of what they are going to do in the paper to orient the reader, to kind of give them a little bit of a preview of what is to come, so that they have an easier time to understand what the paper is going to do. And one way or another, I want to suggest that is also what you want to do in your introduction.